Hello and welcome to another episode of Brody Moore's podcast. You also know me as Liefx. I'm a little bit tired, so I got that sultry voice on today for you guys. There's a little bonus on this episode here. A reminder that we are also on Spotify if you would like to just go audio, even though Spotify does have full video now, but we are on multiple platforms, so you can choose whichever one you want. But if you do want to get involved in the discussion, on YouTube is the best way to do it. And of course, episodes premiere first on YouTube at 12 Eastern time on Mondays every single week that we get an episode recorded. We're a bit ahead of the schedule now, so we should have multiple weeks continuing going on. But let's get over to our guest today. You've seen the title, of course. It's Mike Ellis, Mr. Greggy boy. What's up? What's up?
That was weird. That was weird you calling me by my real name.
Yeah, right?
Which, yeah, I mean, when you say Brody, I'm like, what? No, that's not your name. Yeah, I mean, it's good to be here. I love podcasts. They're one of my favorite ways to discuss things right now in the world. And I think you got an amazing little podcast here, so I was very happy that you invited me on.
I'm happy that you said yes. First off, how's your ça va?
Ça va?
Yeah, ça va? Comment ça va?
Oh, ça va, très bien, merci. Et toi?
Je suis fatigué.
Yeah. I mean, right now, being French is the flavor of the month in European Rocket League, isn't it? I wish I knew more French now. Especially looking back at Vitality, there was a point where I was close to staying with Vitality in some way, moving to Paris, and then I would have been French speaking. Who knows what I could have done now? You know, being able to speak French with the Rocket League scene is key.
I'm doing my Duolingo. I mean, so in Canada we have to learn it for from kindergarten to grade 9, but they teach you the same stuff like every year. Like it's like you don't really.
It's the same over here.
Yeah. So I really wish that they went more in depth with it. So I'm trying to get myself kind of back into it a little bit more. So it's getting there. I'm learning. If it's slow, but Duolingo does help if you do it every single day. I've noticed. So maybe one day we'll just break out our French and start conversing.
Yeah, you might lose some listeners though if you suddenly speak two languages, because being bilingual is a very niche podcast idea. Maybe there's one out there that just is like, this is the English and French podcast. We'll randomly switch between the two at various points.
Okay, yeah, you definitely lose. Well. Majority probably of your audience at that point. That's true. All right, I want to start this off by just telling you a dream, just so you know how my day started here.
Okay.
I'll skip a lot of the boring stuff. It was the old work, yada yada. I was working as Uber all of a sudden, and then I was delivering a pizza, but the person picked up their own pizza, so I didn't need to deliver it. So I went to work at my old work where I used to bartend, and then I sat down, and my brother was there. And my dad brought us Tide Pods, and I guess my brother and I said, "Let's eat these." So we ate the Tide Pods.
How were they?
I don't remember any flavor to them actually. They were gooey, and they dissolved very quickly. Yeah. They dissolved very quickly.
That's good.
And then I asked someone beside me. I said, "Wait, are we screwed?" And they're like, "Yeah, I think you're screwed." So I ran upstairs and just started trying to force myself to vomit, and then I woke up to the alarm to hang out with you. So that was my introduction to today.
Okay, well, I mean, whatever it did to your voice earlier, that was incredible, because I was listening to the start of this podcast wishing I had your voice.
Hey, let's just get down. Just get real tired.
Yeah, I mean, dreams are a weird one. When you have a dream where it's so vivid like that, like you remember the texture of the thing you consumed, everything like that. That's where you start to get a bit freaked out when you wake up. Like, I can't imagine what it was like for you coming out of that. Did you feel like you were still gonna die, or? No.
I that was when I realized immediately. But there are times, and I wonder if there's any that stuck with you. There are times, and I guarantee you've had them, where you've woken up like still fearful of something that happened, or panicked, or like I don't know, maybe you had a love interest in it, and you're like, wait, was that real? Are there any that have stuck with you?
I think the times where it's the weirdest is when you're in a hotel, because you wake up and you're so disoriented because you wake up in a different location. And that just adds to the confusion, especially if you're on low sleep at an event. And you're panicking because you feel like you've missed something for work. Yeah, that's the time where
I'm late for school.
Yeah,
I haven't been in school in 10 years.
Yeah, I've had a few of those, and you look around and you're like, where am I? Like, I don't remember being here. That's weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it's odd how the brain can make something feel so real, which is very clearly like if you ever lucid dreamt, you can very clearly tell. You haven't?
I haven't. No.
Oh, it's so.
I don't think I have.
It's wonderful if you can get it. Lucid dreaming doesn't last very long because your conscious and subconscious start to line up, so you time starts to run normally, right? So and then the conscious starts to fight for control. So honestly, it usually lasts maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds, if you're lucky, a minute to 2 minutes. But when that happens, you become God of this world and you can control everything, which is incredible. There are a lot of techniques you can do. Have you ever taken a dream journal?
I haven't, no. To be honest, dreaming's one of those things that I've not really explored a huge amount. I think there's been a few times where I've looked at a dream in hindsight and worked out what my brain was processing from the previous day. And a little bit of that can be quite good because it helps you sort of learn the lessons that your dream was trying to reaffirm. Outside of that, yeah, I don't really focus on my dreams. I sleep pretty well, to be fair. I don't really dream a huge amount. I tend to just fall asleep and wake up and not notice anything.
That's interesting. So you take dreams to reaffirm things because dreams build off of our experiences in the waking world, and so you try to utilize that as a way to continue learning, eh?
Yeah. So typically, I will dream about gaming because gaming's done just before bed. And I have come up with some of my Minecraft builds back in the day when I used to be a Minecraft builder, and some of my Rocket League ideas kind of come through that dreaming / thinking when very tired phase. And yeah, I don't know if that's dreaming though. Sometimes that's just like brain processing day when falling asleep.
Yeah.
And so, but I definitely had some where it's come out of a dream and I wake up and I'm like, right, let's try and implement that at some point. Yeah, it's interesting because it is just your brain.
Can you remember an example?
Putting it to memory. Ooh, that's a tough one. I think, I mean, recently I've had it. So I competed at the Pokemon European International Cup, Championship? No, EUIC.
You didn't dream about it enough clearly to commit it to memory.
Yeah, well, it's just because I know it is EUIC, but if I say EUIC to the average person, I know what it is. So EUIC, International Championship, I believe it is. And so that's a big major event in Pokemon. There was 1,500 competitors. I was working on my deck before bed, and so I dreamed about playing my deck and some of the changes I would do to it, knowing that when I woke up, it was past the deck submission deadline. So it was just like this really annoying, like I kept waking up and then being like, I should put that in my deck, and then went, I can't. It's too late now, and then I fall back asleep, and it just ruined my sleep because I kept dreaming about playing Pokemon and what I was going to play and the different cards and everything. I distinctly remember there was a card picnic basket, which is a terrible decision, and I would never put it in my deck.
What does it do?
It just heals 30 damage off of each of your Pokemon, and it was to beat a specific matchup, and then it was like,
okay,
but it'll be useless in every other matchup. It's pointless. Don't bother. Okay. But like my dreaming / processing before bed was going wild, and so I didn't really sleep that well. So yeah, I'm a big overthinker. In fact, I said I like podcasts. I have to listen to podcasts to fall asleep. So I put podcasts on.
Okay.
15 minutes sleep timer, and then I'm normally asleep by the end of that 15 minutes. Because otherwise my brain is just going crazy and zooming.
So if I listen to music, now what we do is we just leave a fan on. Even in the winter, there's just always a fan. There's just a white noise. Really helps. I found that I dream less and just sleep straight through night better and wake up less if I have a little bit of that white noise. But if I have music playing as the white noise, I found that I'll wake up 2 hours later to the music and I continuously wake up. So the timers are absolutely necessary. I don't think I could do a podcast though, because my brain would be like, okay, well I need to know what happens next. I don't know how you do podcasts.
Tip: find a really bad podcast. Because then you don't care. So I've done it with audiobooks. I did it with like quite intense scientific audiobook, the kind of thing where people would joke and be like, oh, it's putting me to sleep, you know.
Yeah.
And like when you listen to that, that would put me to sleep. And then I listened to the What's Good podcast, and unfortunately they get, so it's Randolph and Mini Minter, two YouTubers. They just chat a load of rubbish, and it's very like slow paced conversational, like not much like energy, like it's not like super like let's get through this podcast, let's focus on engagement. It's just two guys just chilling and chatting. Whereas recently
like this will be a perfect sleeping podcast.
Literally. And the problem they have now is they've added too much structure to it. So they have like segments where you then like move on to a new segment, and then you're engaged with that whole segment. So I've had to turn it right down to the point where I can't quite hear what they're saying. So it is then just basically like white noise, like you described. Yeah, it's interesting. The theory behind sleeping easier with podcasts is something that's becoming more and more popular as people are learning about sleep hygiene.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, but part of the problem is we just haven't had much science behind it. Is like even the experts are like, we don't know everything about it or much at all about it, but here's how we think it works. But I know you've been, just in general, you've always been on the side of, especially in esports, bringing in the mental side, the physical side, everything doesn't have to do with actually playing the game. I like, so in your thoughts and your research, is that an accurate statement that we still don't know a lot about sleep from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, we know tricks, and we know we're starting to learn about the genetics of sleep as well.
Okay.
So you know how some people are like, oh, I need X amount of hours each night, otherwise I can't function. And some people are like, oh, I only need 5 hours and I'm functional. And then, you know, everyone's like, that's a lie. You'd definitely be more functional with more sleep.
Yeah.
So on and so on. Like everyone has a different amount of sleep that they require.
Right. It's not just 8 hours for everybody. It's
no. And it's also based off of the cycles is yeah, we have rapid eye movement cycles which last around like 50 minutes. And so you don't want to be waking up midway through one of those, really, which is why waking up with alarms, you can sometimes feel really groggy.
Yep.
But then, like, if you've ever woken up just before your alarm, you tend to have a much better wake up because that's when you're out of your rapid eye movement sleep. So, like, it's all about getting in a rhythm with it and having the same sleep each night and so on and so on. But in terms of, like, the podcast thing, I feel like it's similar to, like, bedtime stories. You know, when you're a kid, having someone just talk to you, I think it's just distracting the mind because when your mind is thinking, it's quite hard to fall asleep. So I think that's where that comes from. But yeah, the sleep hygienists in esports, like the OCE players in Rocket League, all got a sleep hygienist who worked with them, and they improved their sleep. But a lot of it just comes down to the buy-in, right? It's all well and good saying do this, this, and this, but if someone doesn't want to do it, they're not going to do it, and then it's actually negatively affecting the team if you're pestering them over something they don't want to do, you know?
Yeah, you got to make it sound convincing. How do you sell that to kids, essentially?
I guess the way you got to do it is sort of plant the seed. So there's when I did my personal trainer training, they have a set of phases that they describe, which can apply to all of these kinds of things. And it's the pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, habit kind of thing.
Okay.
So before you contemplate, you have pre-contemplation, which is where, you know, like for example, you want to go to the gym. First off, you're going,
no, I don't.
You know, but there will be a phase where people will be like, oh, I'm starting to look a bit, you know, I'm starting to look a little bit fat. Maybe I need to start going back to the gym. You know, like it's that early contemplation where there's no feasible, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow.
Yeah, no commitment at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I should go to the gym, or someone makes a comment, you know, like, oh, put on a bit of weight, or, you know, you're looking a bit skinny, or whatever it is, right? There's always some phase to it. And then they go through a phase where they start waking up and they're like, do you know what? Tomorrow's the day I'm going to sign up. Tomorrow's the day I'm going to do this. I'm going to start, you know, I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to do it tomorrow. That's the contemplation phase. And then the next phase is when you start putting it into action. But that phase is really important because you need to get them to follow it for a long enough period where it starts to become a habit. And that's where you need to really commit and like try your best to give them every bit of support there. And I think the problem we got in esports is during that action phase, that's the hardest point to get the buy-in because everyone is working from home.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little, like, I don't know, daily encouragement. It's very much like log on, play some games, log off for a lot of people. So I think that's something that works better within a training facility method or boot camp setup, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we see the teams like BDS who have that
Constant
regular
support.
Yeah, that's where they can start, having a one-to-one with someone and be like, hey, how's it going? Is there anything we can do to help? And so on and so on. So yeah, that's the sort of model, the pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and then habit kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're definitely in the getting to action, trying for a few days, giving up style in esports quite a lot.
It's tough because in my opinion, I would figure the hardest part of the buy-in is the contemplation period, that second step. Pre-contemplation we all go through, right? I've gone through it. I'm my arms are like definitely not muscle mass. I've little bit of gut going on here, right? But it's like I've been in that pre-contemplation for so long. It's like I go for walks. I guess that's action, but like there's no I never I don't know. I feel like getting someone to commit is, at least for me with ADHD, would be the hardest part, to convince them to buy in on the contemplation part.
Well, I guess the why is the big thing. So for you, why do you need to get in shape?
To fit in my suits.
Yeah, like it's
also just I don't know, just to feel better. There's multiple reasons, but
yeah. So there's lots of reasons, but those reasons are kind of mild. They're not like, they're not going to convince you majorly. Like, yeah, I could get a bit better in shape, but a walk would suffice for the daily feeling better stuff and all that kind of thing. But then for a pro player, it's very easy to get that first buy-in because you're like, okay, you want to be the best player in the world, right? Yes. You want to be in the best team in the world. Yes.
I see. Okay.
You want to so you're like, okay, this is going to directly improve your income, your main thing that makes you feel better each day, which is being better at the video game you're good at. As a team. So, another thing that helps with contemplation is a friend saying, let's go to the gym together in the gym scenario. As a team, let's do this together as a team. We work together. We're all going to try this at the same time. There's also the education. So contemplation is always tough with the gym if you're just going to go and you don't have any plan. Whereas if someone says, hey, I've got you a PT for a year, people are much more likely to do it. So with esports orgs, they can be like, right, here we go. We've got someone who's going to help you directly with this thing that you're struggling with. So that's going to help you. So I think the resources and the fact you're doing it as a team, the fact that it's going to directly improve your performance in theory, if you can educate them and get them on board with that, it should in theory work. I think the problem you've got in esports right now is everyone tries to do too much too quickly and not in person. As I mentioned again, in person is so key to the buy-in, because otherwise you're just going to be telling a bunch of young adults and teenagers, do this every single day. They're not going to want to get out of bed an hour earlier to go do some stretches, right? Like,
yeah,
when, they're not going to do that.
Well, and then again, that's why I wonder, like, at what point. So the motivator. So the answer to the contemplation phase is you hang over their head. Well, this will make you one step closer to being a world champion because that's your goal. So that's solved. But I imagine it becomes hard to, because an action I feel almost immediately follows up after once contemplation is solved. But the problem then becomes habit, because I mean, I try to look at it from a player perspective. I find that, okay, you found my motivation. You've got me on the contemplation. You've got the resources in, and you've got me a PT for a year. Boom. Now I can get action. But I imagine mentally it would be hard for me then, if I don't see results fairly soon, to run this into habit now, because I'm like, well, is this actually helping?
Yeah, so that's where, so there's a few different angles with that. Firstly, you've got to pick the right battles. So, this is where you go, right, what is the most important battle right now that I can get them to win?
Okay.
Maybe it's nutrition, maybe it's sleep, maybe it's exercise. Whatever it is, you have to choose the right battle for the player. And also, I think the key is to make them realize that it's not just for competition. Like if you're I don't know, like if you're in an office space, you might say to someone, you might be like, hey, look, you will improve your productivity each day if you go to the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a common thing in workplaces, which is why workplaces will often have gym memberships included as part of their package. You know, they'll give them support in that and all that kind of thing. And it will also improve, you know, energy levels each day. It'll improve. I mean, let's be honest, these are young adults. They're worried about dating life. It will make you look more attractive, you know, like start realizing that it's not just for performance. And in that way, when they're doing it, they're not just thinking, oh, if we win, then I'll keep doing this. If we lose, I'll stop, right?
Yeah.
You want them to see the outside of game benefits. And I think I've seen that in a few players. Like, for example, Joyo in Rocket League. He's lost a lot of weight. He feels a lot better. You know, he feels a lot more confident and so on and so on. Whether it's affected his performance, I don't think he could say yes or no. He might feel more consistent or something. I don't know. But like realistically, it was done for reasons outside of performance.
Yeah. Okay. Now, would you consider everything that you would do if you were in charge of that? Would you consider this coaching or management? Like, what is this? What does this responsibility fall under in terms of position?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it depends on the org you're in. So it's the same thing with all types of support for players. Is some orgs have 15 members of staff that can help a team. Some orgs will have 3, you know, and like that's where the role will get a bit muddy. I think in a bigger org, this is a head of performance role. You know, there's someone who works across all of the teams and gives them advice around performance. You could say it's the individual team members of the performance teams at orgs. Like if they've got a
that's a big team, though.
Yeah, and that's what you see in the biggest orgs who have League of Legends, CS:GO, etc., etc. When it comes down to smaller teams, I think coaches giving some advice around that or like directing them in those places can be good. I think it's dangerous to do it when you don't know what you're talking about. You don't want to start like preaching stuff that's not real.
Sure.
You know, because just as much as I could say, make sure you go do exercise because it'll make you play better. Someone who believes it could say, don't do exercise, it'll tire you out and you won't be as good in scrims, you know? So I think it's doing it in the right way, doing it in a way that is sustainable and educating the player that at first it will make you more tired and you might have a drop in performance for a brief period because you're getting more tired. But long term, that will build up your fitness. You'll be more focused, more alert for it. You know, like you got to package it in the right way. So I think, it's a coach's job to do what's best for the players. And I think that's the other thing as well a lot of coaches don't think about in esports is you're not just coaching for results, you're coaching to make these people better. You want to make them better human beings, you want to improve them for life. And like I'm not trying to brag and be like, oh, look at me, I did this, but like some of my favorite players that I've coached are the ones where I look at them now and I see them have grown up, you know, like Nolly, for example. And it's like Nolly has gone away and some of the stuff we educated him on and gave him that contemplation phase, he then put into action himself. And like, I'm not saying I was the person who did that or the guild were the team that did that, but everyone who's interacted with Nolly along that journey has helped develop him into a better human being. And the same thing I say with Fairy Peak, right? Like when Fairy Peak was first under my management and coaching, barely spoke to the camera, didn't do interviews, didn't want to, you know, converse with his teammates that much. And then now he's a streamer and he's living a much more fulfilling life. And so that's what I see as a coach in esports that's not being done enough is to improve these human beings' lives beyond just being a professional gamer.
Yeah, no, I mean, the fact that I asked these questions of, okay, well, this is where I could see a roadblock and you already had an answer means you know what you're doing. And you've thought about this process before. These processes, because this sounds like you go, the only coaching that I really do is I try to take it more on the mental side. Okay, what's the root cause of this problem? And it seems like to a degree and expanded, that's what you do. You've said, okay, how do we build a system? What are the core motivators to moving along this system? And how do I find out those things about each individual person to make sure that they stay on track here? Did you develop this yourself? Is this stuff you've pulled from other people? Where have you learned this along your journey in life?
Oh, it's just from everyone around you, right? Like I've learned it from the people I've worked with. I've read books. I've listened to podcasts, I've listened to interviews. I got a lot of influence from Professor Steve Peters, who's one of the greatest psychologists to ever grace the planet. He created the Chimp Model, and I have learned, and I don't want to say perfected because you never perfected it, but
honed it.
I've honed it in my own life to try and develop my own understanding of the way my brain works and utilize that. And the whole idea, I'll briefly describe it, is it splits your brain into 3 main sections. You've got the human brain, the chimp brain, and the computer. And each of these have benefits and weaknesses. The human is who you want to be, like what you want to achieve each day. It's very slow and methodical, logical. It's empathic, all this kind of stuff. And then the chimp is the sort of the. Oh. Well, weirdly, it's like between the chimp and the computer is what you want, but the chimp is the primitive brain. It's the one which it reacts to fight and flight. It's the one that tells you don't bother doing that. That's too much work, but also tells you get angry at this thing because it's annoying you.
Tribalism, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And then the computer is the part of your brain which you program. So this is where you program your values, your core values, the things that you don't even have to think about. So, for example, like we described before the podcast, you asked me, you can swear if you want, and I said, I don't swear, right?
Yep.
So for me to override swearing, I have to essentially block the computer with my brain to swear. I can't swear instinctually at all. And so that's something my computer has trained to do, and it has blocked that path. It has created those values. Same thing in Rocket League. When these players are playing optimally, they have trained their computer to follow pathways that they want their body to follow. When the chimp takes over or the human takes over, that's where you start to see some problems. But you've got to utilize all of them together. And in fact, the computer is processes things the fastest of any of the three parts of the brain, and the human part process it the slowest. And the reason why I describe all that is whenever I'm looking at players, I'm trying to see which parts of their brains are working. And a few of the teams I've worked with recently, I've taught them the Chimp Model to kind of help them understand the way their brain works, and understand that the chimp is a part of your brain. You have to accept it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to deal with it. You cannot blame it. You can't say, sorry, my chimp took over. But you have to be able to go, hey, look, right now I am angry and frustrated. My chimp is telling me to shout at you, but I'm going to listen to it, acknowledge it, shine a spotlight on it, and go, I don't want to listen to you right now. I'm gonna try and focus, and then we'll deal with you later, And then that's where you can have your one-to-ones, let the chimp out, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting way to sort of model the brain, and it's sort of it's really helped me a lot when coaching, and I think a lot of that stuff could develop esports to another level if we start to see the performance psychology keep improving, which it already is. There's a huge amount of performance psychology in esports right now.
You got that from Dr. Peters, you said it was?
Professor Steve Peters. He's a lecturer at the university I studied medicine at, but he's also he's worked with some of GB's most successful athletes. Our cycling team had him help develop them. He's worked with a lot of good football teams in the UK, soccer teams, and just in general has worked with very successful people all around the world. And he's written lots of amazing books, and the Chimp Paradox is his most popular model. And I think it's probably one of those books that's changed my life the most. There's another one, they seem to all be animal based, but there's another one, Pig Wrestling, which was written by a psychology group called Mindflick, who I worked with a little bit. And they taught me some stuff. They trained me in their psychological profiling tool that they had called Spotlight, and I learned a lot from them. And Pig Wrestling is a book that I've recommended to several friends, and it's like changed their lives too. One of my friends in their final year of university took a day off of writing their dissertation to read the book, and then they came back and absolutely smashed the final year.
What's the concept?
So Pig Wrestling is it's about problem solving. So it's really good in esports management, esports coaching sense. It's really good in, like a workplace environment. So the whole idea is that
are we going to wrestle this pig?
Yeah, when you got a problem, it's a pig. It's the analogy is it's a pig, and you wrestle it, and it goes through a series of anecdotal things with a young manager in a business, and he's walking through and meeting all these various people who teach him stuff. who all follow the pig wrestling model. And there's different things like reframing the pig, look out for the nuggets, pigs aren't pets, all this kind of stuff. So it's little different ways to remember it. And so when I come across problems now, I sort of use the pig wrestling method to kind of redo the problem in a way that helps. And one of my favorite anecdotes from that they use is for the longest time, urinals in Amsterdam airport were getting very messy, and they put signs up saying, please aim better for all the men, all that kind of stuff going in. And they sent cleaner after cleaner. They employed more cleaners. But then someone came in and went, I have an idea. I'm just going to etch a fly onto the urinals. And then because of that, men would aim at the fly, and it was at the sweet spot on the urinal so that the flow would go in. It wouldn't create as much mess, and it reduced the amount of cleaning that was needed by a crazy percentage. And it was just the idea of putting that fly on. And that's sort of what I'm saying about like the problem solving. Like when I used to coach a lot of teams, I would try and look at a different angle. So, like player misses ball. Oh, player must have bad mechanics. And it's like, well, it's not necessarily that. Let's sort of look at the bigger picture. Let's understand why that's the case. Why are they in a position where they're missing here? Okay, mechanics could be a factor, but actually it's not mechanics. It's the way they're positioning themselves. It's the fact that they're driving too fast, or, they're boosting into the play, or whatever it is. And so you can start to like reframe that problem as a different thing coming from a different angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting. And this was my, again, I have maybe 1% of the experience of coaching, so I'm not trying to say I know anything about this, but my approach whenever I did any coaching was to find what was the root of that. And I found with one team I was helping out, I found the root of the problem of a player playing slower was or being late to challenges was that they were so terrified of letting their teammates down. It didn't even have to do with they had great mechanics. They just didn't want to let their teammates down, so they'd overthink every scenario that they entered, which as a result let their teammates down, right? So and then now you have to approach them outside of the game and say, how do we make sure that you're comfortable and your teammates let you know they're comfortable? They want you to go for this stuff. If you make a mistake, it's okay. They don't care. And now you have to bring them together for a whole thing outside of that, which is interesting. Yeah, it's not just what's happening in the game.
Yeah, that's a common one. I think just to use a little bit of Rocket League coaching there, like that terrified to challenge thing is something that I've noticed a lot, and it's one of the big factors in some of the best teams now in Rocket League. Something I've been trying to really implement in some of the teams I've coached recently is your teammates are behind you and to the side of you. So therefore, the best thing you can do in most scenarios is just let them hit the ball. And so like the idea of the ultimate challenge is one where you go into it and the best outcome is you do nothing, means that you can go in and just force the ball past you, and you don't have to commit yourself. You can go back straight away. And so what you notice a lot with like K-Corp is they go into challenges and are literally willing to go, yeah, I'll leave it. You're thinking I'm going to hit it, so you're going to just hit it to my teammate who's behind me for free, and then they get a free ball. And that's one of the, if you can structure as a team in Rocket League in a way whereby going for the ball, every outcome is beneficial, except for the one where you dive at it and do something stupid, then you're much more relaxed going into it, knowing that you can always just go, I don't fancy it now.
Yeah, I got someone behind me. I try to play like that in ranked. It doesn't work because there's not someone behind me.
Exactly. And that's again where you said about the communication. You can help make someone feel more relaxed by saying, look, I'm covering behind you, I'm back right, I'm back left, whatever it is. So yeah, that's something that you see a lot more now, because the panicky teams, the ones who dive at stuff, they're the ones who get punished for that, because you can literally just let them hit the ball to you. So yeah, it's interesting because so much of why people struggle in Rocket League comes down to the way they mentally think about stuff and change something they're so familiar with when they play ranked, when they're relaxed, they can do every time. The moment they're in a high pressure scenario, it's like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to be the reason we concede. I don't want to cause a mistake, you know?
I feel like that's where you have to let Chimp Brain take over.
So you got to program the computer. So the Chimp Brain, because it's fight, flight, freeze, it can negatively affect you.
You don't have as much control as what you're saying over it.
Yeah. And it's very fast. So the chimp brain would take over in a lot of situations and would cause you to freeze, you know?
Okay.
The chimp goes in, and like in a high pressure situation in an esport, your chimp brain acts like you're in the jungle and you're fighting off lions, right? So the chimp in those situations when it feels like you're about to make a mistake is thinking life or death. And so it goes, don't do that. That could lead us to conceding, which would mean I'd get eaten by a lion. So therefore it reacts in a way that goes, freeze, or I'm going to dive at it because that's what I've got to do, or whatever it is. And so that's where the chimp takes over. Whereas if you can control that chimp and just program the computer of like, I can challenge in this way because this is the way we structure as a team. And I'm confident my teammates behind me. You're much more likely to go in and make the right decision. And then that's where you see that, you know, like moist on LAN level of performance where it's faster than human normally act. It's because their computer has taken over in those situations. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Because I always just, again, I assume that younger players were just in general tend to be better because they are relying on instincts a bit more, right? Like they're letting the chimp take over. So I feel like it almost is better than a computer, but I guess you're bringing up the fact that it's unpredictable. It could give you flight rather than fight. Now, have you come across a player that does just resort to fight over flight and say, okay, let the chimp brain go more?
I think that's where you really start to see tilt, right? Like tilt is essentially your chimp taking over and reminding you of the whole world is crashing down.
Flight.
Yeah, and that's where the chimp starts maybe even having blaming teammates and being like, you're the problem, you know, we're going to lose this game, and it starts thinking about the bigger picture. The flow state, as a lot of people describe, is really when that computer is in control. So
really, I always assumed that was instinctual. Like I'm not.
So it is instinctual, but it's like trained instinct, right?
Interesting.
Because your instinct is never related to video games, right? Like no one has video game. No one has a video game instinct when they come out the womb, you know? Like
we're born into the Matrix. It's all a simulation. Yeah. Of course, we know.
You train around what's around you, right? And like, I guess the instinct for video games is trained as well. And there is an element of chimp is better than human sometimes, right? Like, you know, some people play better when they're frustrated. Some players when they've got a little.
But it's unpredictable, and that's what you don't want to rely on.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of that honeymoon phase is like, you know, happy chimp, right?
Yeah.
But then that like super well controlled, we have a structure, this is how we play, we do this every time, computer stuff, which I don't think many people in esports, in particular in Rocket League, have really nurtured that computer mindset because it takes a long time. And like, I think the people you see it with the most are the ones where you speak to them after a game they've just played, and like most top players in Rocket League can't tell you what's just happened because their computer took over, right? That's where you really are in the ultimate flow state with the computer, is where you cannot remember what happened. You can't remember the experience. You can't remember the way you played because you've just literally an out of body experience. You've just let your programming take over. And that's what Professor Steve Peters programmed into Chris Hoy, one of the most successful GB cyclists who he worked very closely with. He taught him this methodology around basically out of body experience going around the track.
Yep.
So when he was cycling, he just couldn't remember what was going on. And then as he finished, he was like, wait, I've just won a gold medal, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're going through that experience, thinking about the bigger picture, that's where your chimp starts telling you like, oh, you're going to fail. Don't do this. It's not worth it. You know, survive, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting because it's sort of coming into esports a little bit.
Yeah, I have two branches I want to go here. One I'll just anecdotally say I love flow state. To me, is one of the most wonderful feelings in the world. I don't know what it is. It's just again, it's as you said, you just get lost. You're going. And could I tell you the goals I scored that game? Probably not. Could I tell you what? No, it was. And the same thing was hockey. It was just all of a sudden I was a goaltender. All of a sudden, I just know that there's a puck in my glove. I'm just, well, there it is. I caught it, and I didn't realize my arm shot out to catch it. And to me, I've always just assumed, oh, that's just it's instinct. But it makes me feel better that you tell me, no, it's because I'm instinctually doing the things I've trained myself on. So that means if I'm getting into flow state in Rocket League, even though I don't remember what just happened and I feel like it's out of my control, I should still be proud because it's the things I worked on that came out in that flow state.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing to think about is when do things start to go wrong for you? And that, like, for me, when I'm playing ranked, I go on massive swings in my win streak. I'll play incredibly well when my computer's in control. And I'll get a few bad teammates that take me out of it because then my human takes over. My human's like breaking them down, trying to work out what they're doing. I guess that's a downside of having a very analytical way of looking at Rocket League, that when I'm playing it, I can often let the human take over. And then when the human takes over, that's when Chimp starts to take control. And then I start losing. And when I start losing, that's when the Chimp is in control and the Chimp starts making rash decisions, get frustrated at mistakes. You're focusing on the wrong things, that kind of stuff. So those kinds of combats that are going on in your brain, the Chimp has a lot of control over the human. It's like 5 times stronger than the human. So that's why, you have those invasive thoughts. You have those like, oh, I'm just going to not bother going for a run this morning, that kind of stuff, because the Chimp is so powerful. And that's where the computer, because it's a programmed system that overrules the rest of your body. That's where, like, that's such an important part of your body to program and sort of relinquish control to let it take over in those important moments, that it only really happens in those super highly trained skills. Like, think of a surgeon, right? Like, a surgeon is not thinking what they're doing, they're just doing, right? Because they've done it 100 times before. And like, that's where you've created this just flow chart of things that you do in any situation that the computer can overtake on. But yeah, the way the Chimp takes over is often related to when you're tired. When you're tired, the Chimp is much more likely to take control. When you're doing something you're unfamiliar with, something that's new, a new experience, that's where, when you start lagging, or when you start, when you're in a high pressure tournament, or whatever it is, right? When the scenario feels different, that's when the Chimp or the human can start taking over. So that's where how a coach presents a situation can make a massive difference to how their Rocket League ability reacts. If you go into a quarterfinal and the coach talks to them like it's about to be a big quarterfinal match or a final or whatever it is, that's going to affect them in that way.
The Chimp can take over and panic and
So breathing exercises, visualization, all of these different methods that you can do in the lead up to it to make it feel normal is the key there.
So it's just interesting. So I'm gonna, again, every person is different too, but maybe you can explain this. So first off, I want to know if you have any tips for getting to flow state quicker, because in my opinion, I find flow state was relatively easy to hit the younger I was. The older I get, I find it's easier to get to overthink, to get too analytical, it just hitting flow state seems to be harder to get myself into. So first, I'll throw out if there's any tips to that. And secondly, I've forgotten the second question, so I'll remember it after you answer that first one.
Yeah, so I think the best advice to getting into flow state that I can think of is to create rituals that get you into that position. So whenever I've competed, I've always had things that are standard every time. I'll have water available. I'll eat similar kind of things. I'll practice for a similar amount of time. I will do the same breathing exercises before. Like I will try and have the room temperature the same. Like you just try and create a set of normals that make it so that when you get into that state, it feels normal, right?
Okay, so my second thing to add on to this, and you can continue on, was that this was my second question. It was just more information. Is that I find my flow state sometimes will be 4 a.m. when I'm barely able to keep my eyes open, and all of a sudden I'm just starting winning, or I'll have days where I was hanging out the night before, I had some drinks, and I'm a little hungover the next day, and all of a sudden I'm so good at Rocket League, and that seems counter intuitive to what should be happening.
Yeah, so to me it sounds like you have pretty good control over your chimp in general until the chimp starts chirping up, which would be when you get tilted and stuff. And it sounds like your human part of your brain is the one that takes over, the analytical part of your brain, right? So when you're tired, what might be happening there is your analytical part of your brain is a little suppressed.
Yeah.
And so you're just, you're not overthinking, you're not taking over in that sense. And then the same thing could be true when you're hungover, right? Like you've got less care. So that, and it's the same thing when you're younger, right? Younger people tend to care a little bit less inhibition. So it could be something to do with that. But it could also just be how you perceive something as well. You know, I've had many times where I thought I was playing amazing, and then I watched the replay back, and I'm like, whoa, I was not playing good there.
Fair.
And so it can just be like, you know, when you're not caring as much, you don't remember mistakes. So you only look at positives. And that can often lead you to play better because, you know, when you start seeing mistakes, that's when things start to go wrong.
Yeah.
Like, if your teammate misses an open net, when you're in flow state or when you don't care as much, you just go, oh, it's all right, I'll just get next one. But then if that happens when you're frustrated or you're overthinking, you're going to make changes, you're going to make adjustments, and that's where you start overriding the computer, right? Like if your decision that your computer wants to make every time is to make the right decision, which could be passing, which could be solo play or whatever, and you've seen your teammate miss an open net after you've passed it to them and you've made the right decision, you might try and override that computer and go, I cannot trust them, so therefore I must do this myself. And so that's what we're talking about. Like overriding the computer is a negative thing when it comes to performance, and it's why you see when another team is playing really well against you, if your computer isn't very flexible and you're stuck and limited to a set of methods that won't work against them, especially in other games which are a bit more tactical, that's where you can see teams just get absolutely obliterated by the habits that they formed.
Yeah. Okay. It makes a lot of sense as to why that would feel, or even if just perception, but like, hey, I'm getting dubbed, so something's right. But it makes sense that I've gone back to what my training is, and somehow I need to bring that to a state where I am well rested and I am focused. How do I rely on the habits, the methods that I have built before, and not just overthink it? And I think it is something I learned recently. Specifically, this is again just personal anecdotes here, is that I recently started feeling a lot better about my play because I started committing to my decisions more and saying, okay, well, I know I am right to, for instance, I'm right to go for the ball here, even though most people might think, oh, that's a double commit or that's a mistake. I know I have the better touch and I know I have the follow-up. I go for it. I get a goal. And I feel like I'm playing overall better because I'm committing to the things I know rather than relying on instinct of like, oh, I shouldn't double commit. I should wait and trust them to do something, but then it doesn't work. So yeah, I think that TLDR, I'm agreeing. There's a lot of merit to what you're saying. It sounds like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think what you described there is interesting because that's something that I saw in Oxygen when they first formed at the beginning of this season. Was they were decisive and committing to their decisions, but I believed they weren't the correct set of decisions to make.
Gotcha.
And so once people started to realize what kind of decisions they were going for, you could punish their decisiveness. And that's the same thing as applied to, in Europe, we would always do it against Spanish Bim Bam. You know they're going to go every time, so therefore you can punish it because you can predict what they're going to do. So we trained ourselves in a way that would punish a Spanish player who you know is going to commit every time. So there's all these different things, and that's where having a malleable computer that can adjust based off the opponent is important. And I think it's also important to recognize that when you're first learning a new set of ideas, it might be more optimal, but you might not be executing it as well. So, for example, hey, I am learning to control my boost better. Now, you're going to go through an adjustment period where you're doing the right thing, but because you're focused on it, that's your human brain in control. So therefore, you'll miss shots a bit more. You'll mess up your touches. So that's where like trying to settle a player's understanding of, okay, we're learning something new today. it's gonna go wrong. We're gonna mess up, but that's fine because we're adjusting our computer. We're training it to do different things. And so the amount of times I've seen teams playing better, like just genuinely better Rocket League, but we're still losing because we've missed 5 shots and then we've given away a dumb mistake.
Yeah.
Then they're going to look at that and going to be like, well, this is obviously not better because we're losing. It's like, well, actually, if we look at the way you're playing, we will win more games than we lose playing this way in the future when your shooting comes back naturally, right? So yeah, it's just sort of trusting the process a little bit as well.
Right, and that's why I brought up at the beginning of like how do you get players past the contemplative into action and then habit. If they don't see those results immediately, they're going to be like, I don't want to contemplate this anymore.
Yeah, and that's where it got really tough at some points in the Rocket League season because there wasn't enough time to introduce ideas and then them to improve it enough that they could execute it in the next tournament. Yeah. Which is where we've seen teams have bad tournaments and good tournaments because they might have been working on something and just not had enough time to implement it long term. So yeah, there's a lot there to unpackage for players, and I think making them more educated on the way their own body and mind works in a competitive space is key for their long-term sustainable careers.
Yeah.
And I think where people are describing Rocket League as a young esport and only the young players can win in it, I think there are going to be some players now who have much longer careers because they have come in with a much better performance mindset. Looking at players like apparently Jack, like Nolly, I would hope that they have longer careers just based off of what they know and understand about performance now. So we'll see.
I mean, I'm going to be presumptuous here based off of everything I've heard, but I'm going to assume then that you don't like that teams split up so often. I assume it'd be much better if teams maintained rosters to be able to work on these things longer.
Yeah, I don't know, because that's when you start going into business, right? So
yeah,
performance is often different to business. So performance, you want long-term, year and a half to work on stuff, whatever it is, right? So realistically, you want the same players long-term. But then business wants results now. Business wants to win the next tournament that comes up and so on and so on. And also, that's where interpersonal relationships and all, and it's, of course, it's a lot more complicated than
it's
just
not
performance.
As black and white as,
Yeah. And like, realistically, most teams that have done well have made roster moves in the history of Rocket League. You know, like Vitality, we signed KDOP and it was we instantly started winning. You know, NRG signed Turbo, instantly started winning. Seiko to BDS became the best team in the world. So I do think that short term in esports roster moves are great, especially in Rocket League because of how untactical it is as a game. In games like Valorant, CSGO, League of Legends, where team strategy and playbooks is so key, you need a lot more time to get that initial step up to a certain level. So they should sit together a bit more. And also in those settings, you can just switch one player out a lot easier and it not have a massive team effect. But I do believe in Rocket League that player swapping does make a lot of sense most of the time because there is a better player out there normally who can win you more games.
Sure, in the short term, right? But for you preferentially, what would you prefer to see, and including management, everything? What is your ideal situation when it comes to a Rocket League team? Is it long term, being able to execute a long term plan?
Yeah, I think so. But then, you know, most teams I've worked on, we've made a roster swap most of the time. You know, like most often we would make a roster swap.
But, like, yes, but swapping works.
Yeah. I think part of that, it just comes down to the culture of Rocket League and the fact that a lot of players go up and down quite quickly. You know, there is a lot of new talent constantly, so there is someone better out there. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, looking at Optic Gaming now and seeing what they're doing, I'm excited to see what they can pull off this season, because they haven't changed, right? As far as I know.
No, I'm pretty sure they're going in with the same roster. Yeah.
And like, if they can see a linear improvement season by season, knowing that the rest of the scene around you is going up and down, right? It's tough because you could go down in a league in theory, and you'd think that's worse, but actually everyone else could have just gone up around you, and that's where Rocket League is so unique with how fast it's growing and improving.
It shifts so quickly.
that you could improve as a team and still move down a position in the league, you know. So yeah, I honestly, it's a tough question because long term I'd love that, but then sometimes a player doesn't fit the model you're going for, and that's where I think finding the right 3 players who all buy into a strategy at the beginning of a big roster shuffle like we had this season was key. And I don't think many players found that dream team of people who were on the same page.
That's true. Okay, I want to get away from. We talked too much about these kids. Screw them. I want to talk about you more. Back to you're with your schooling. Was your intent to utilize that schooling with esports, or was this like where? Tell us where that started to fit together.
So I was part of the Minecraft community from about 16 when I started getting properly into it.
Okay.
So I was a builder for the Nox crew, who now run MC Championship. And they are the biggest build team now in Minecraft, probably.
Oh, that's
one of the most notable. And a lot of those people are the same people who were there when I was there. I love them to bits. They're amazing. Went to Insomnia through them from like I-51 to I-57, I think. And it was through that I discovered esports while I was at university.
Okay.
So I was fully intending to become a doctor. I went to university to study medicine. I was going to be a doctor. I was interested in sports medicine and performance medicine, and like the musculoskeletal system and understanding that. And whilst I was at university, I started to bend towards I'd love to be the first esports doctor and all this kind of stuff. So I started falling in love with esports. I had to retake my second year because I was streaming Rocket League too much and commentating like every weekly. There was a period of time where I was like every day I got home from uni, I would commentate a weekly.
Yeah.
And it was like 5 a week, 6 a week. And I did a lot of sport at uni as well, so I just wasn't studying really. So I retook that year. Was like, oh, by the way, this is why, because I've been doing all this gaming stuff. I'm just going to start making money out of it, I promise. And then 2 years later, I dropped out of university with a full-time job at Vitality, and they're like, you did say you're going to make a career out of this, so fair play. So yeah, that was my intention, to be a doctor, and then I dropped out to go full-time at Vitality, and it was about a month or 2 after I dropped out that we then won the World Championship. So
yeah, that's crazy.
It was kind of like, okay, now I'm committing to this path of esports. So yeah.
It's crazy how it can shift like that, because it's, and I've heard it, and this is not a, telling people we're not condoning dropping out, but I find a lot of people in esports tended to do that. I dropped out in a 4th year of computer programming, right? I dropped out to go travel. That had anything to do with esports, but I also found I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I dropped out, went and found myself in the world, and then came back and eventually got into esports. So I'm glad I'm not working a career in computer programming, and I got to do this instead. But I've seen that a lot in esports, and I think it is just a testament that just in life in general, if something comes up that you really enjoy and you're passionate about, and you can see sustainability in it, or some sort of sustainability, then you probably should be pursuing those things. But it's hard to convince not only other people but yourself sometimes that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I did try and balance the two together. I did Gfinity Elite Series casting while I was still at uni. I did some coaching while I was still at uni. I did Clash Royale when I was doing that. I actually went out for my interview where they flew me out to LA to do like a test interview a weekend before my second year final exams. And I fell out with my family over that a little bit because they're like, you shouldn't be flying out to LA. But like I was on the flight doing test papers and like in my hotel doing test papers. And then I actually denied the second season of Clash, declined this second season of Clash Royale, where it was in Germany, because they're flying me out on like a Tuesday, working Wednesday, flying home Thursday. So I was like missing 3 out of 5 days of uni.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I wasn't enjoying it a huge amount. So after 2 weeks of that, I was like, look, I don't think this is for me anymore. And I didn't enjoy how they changed my role on the show. So it was kind of like, university was my priority until Vitality, where they gave me a full-time job, and I was literally every day waking up, working more than a 9 to 5, and then going, I should probably do some uni work tomorrow, going to bed, waking up, going like, I need to do all this esports stuff. And then, you know, it eventually got to a point where I was like, I haven't started my dissertation. I've got a month to hand it in. So I should probably just drop out at this point. So yeah, I think you don't have to have something, but like if you're going to drop out of uni, especially, you know, because I'm from a place of privilege where I've got that safety net, where if I drop out of university and don't go down a career path, I'm not going to be homeless.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely a unique position to be in, and very, very much like a common esports story of like, hey, I can take this risk because if not, my parents can support me for a bit. So it definitely made it less risky. But I think you can definitely do the two together. I know a lot of very successful people who finished university and then committed to their esports endeavors whilst trying to sort of balance the two together.
Now I just ADHD'd out of again. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, have you ever ended up thinking back to that? Has the a regret ever come to bite back? Like maybe I should go back to this. I mean, because especially in esports, as you found out firsthand, it can be very volatile, right? You don't necessarily always know what's coming next. And I don't know if any time before that or after that you maybe did it ever come back to your head of like, I've done the wrong thing here, I need to be back in school? Or have you just stayed committed to like, no, I'm going to make this thing work?
Yeah, I mean, this year's been a bit tough because it's been the first big step back for me with esports, where beforehand it was like year on year I was getting better opportunities. I was getting, you know, like I fell forward out of everything I left. So like after Vitality, I fell into the guild early formation phase. And then after guild, I fell straight into RLCS talent. And even like after RLCS didn't bring me back, I still fell into opportunities, you know? And then now that I'm in this position where I've not got income right now, I have looked at university a bit and thought maybe I could go back to university. The problem is just with time, like esports in a year, so much can change.
Right.
And university, you have to apply so far in advance to get onto the next year of university. And then you're committing for 3 to 4 years of your life to that. So I was like, actually, do you know what? I'll look at what's in clearing. Maybe I could compete in University Rocket League a bit. You know, I've thought about it, but the courses that I'd want to do are at, you know, like I could in theory apply for Oxbridge, Oxford and Cambridge. I could in theory apply for Loughborough for sports courses, which are like the best of the best in each of those courses. Because of the fact I was a medical student, my grades are at a level which they'd be able to accept. And then obviously as far as applications go, I can't imagine there's many esports professional coaches out there who would be applying. So, you know, the classic thing of stand out compared to the rest.
Yeah.
It definitely would stand out.
There,
but whether I'd want to do it, that's where I'm like, okay, is it the right thing for me right now in life? And literally tomorrow I could get an offer to have a very well paid job in esports, and that could be my future for the next 2 years.
Right.
And I just don't know when that's going to be. That next, like, tomorrow's the day where I get the offer.
Yeah. How do you balance that? Because it almost feels like you have to just live every single day in anxiety. Like, is it going to be tomorrow? Is it not? What do I do? Is it like you're always on this edge of having to make a decision without actually making a decision? It seems that must be so hard.
Yeah, that's life right now. This has been definitely the toughest. Man, how long has it been? It's been like 7-8 months. Yeah, 7 months now in 4 days' time since I found out I wasn't going to be on the RLCS. And
October.
it was end of September, found out, and then it was like early October that it was sort of public to everyone. And like, it's just been fighting to kind of survive through that period, because especially like I'm doing my podcast, Beyond the Game, and we have bigger plans more than just a podcast. You know, it's going to be that go along to events, media coverage, videos, all these kind of things. It was going to be a big project that was going to be self-funded through the money made by being an RLCS caster. I moved flats with the expected income of casting and everything like that. So now I'm sat in this position where I've kind of checkmated myself into committing to the project or giving up all of the work that we put in, all the money we've invested into it, to have a cheaper lifestyle where I just try and find the next lower paid job. Because in theory, I could get a job, but I'd probably have to move. And in theory, I could get a job, but then I would not have as much time to do the project. It was just that dream combo of being an RLCS caster, having so much spare time to be able to then build on a big project outside of it, that I'm now just burning money doing this project, trying to find the next casting gig, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward at things like Gamers 8. I don't know if I'm getting that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. And like that could keep paying the bills a bit. And then maybe some coaching consultancy stuff, maybe some part-time things like I did with Knights or Dark Zero before I commit to Dark Zero. You know, like all of these little jobs here and there. But it does feel a little bit like just in this 7-month period, the Rocket League community has forgotten about me, you know? Like I'm sure you felt this before when you were no longer an RLCS. It's like you're no longer in the conversations anymore. No one's mentioned you. No one's, you know, reaching out to get your opinion on stuff. Like no one's offering you anything because ultimately you're not part of the show anymore. So that's where I'm at right now.
It's difficult to just on a human level to what. So where do I start the conversation? Because I'll just start spewing stuff and see if a thought comes out of it. But the idea is how do you find your value as a human if a lot of other people's value to you depends on your position within a community, like a team or a broadcaster, and then all of a sudden you still try to create content on the side, whether you're streaming, whether it's with your podcast, and it feels like all of a sudden people's opinion or their value they place on your opinion drops, and it feels like your value is as a human is dependent on someone else's decisions. It's a very interesting pathway to walk existentially, because it's like what is my value, and do I also subscribe to my value being lessened because I'm not in here? Like, do I see myself as less valuable? And where? So I don't know if any of that made sense, but you know.
Yeah, I think streaming is the easiest place to sort of acknowledge that. So back when I was casting, I was streaming analysis content. I'd analyze the previous weekend of RLCS on my stream. I'd have a lot of viewers. I think, looking back on it, I think I was probably the second most viewed RLCS caster doing Rocket League content outside of Johnny Boy, right? So like, in terms of valuing opinion, I was a valued opinion in the Rocket League space around what I thought about Rocket League. I would educate people, that kind of stuff. And then when I was no longer on the broadcast, I went, well, my value now is as a coach, right? I can no longer be valuable as a person of the people. I have to be valuable to one organization. So I hid all of my information, right? I stopped making analytical content because I can't go telling other teams how to be better when I need to coach an individual team. So then I start having this sort of secret value that is only known about by the teams I'm working with. Now, I did analysis content I did coaching consultancy for 3 teams, and all of them offered me a job afterwards, Dark Zero being the last of the 3. And I committed to Dark Zero, and then suddenly Dark Zero all fell through. They just made the wrong decision going with Turbo, I think. Like, it was not a good entry into Rocket League at the timing of Turbo's career. And they weren't able to utilize his personality well enough to get the value there. So, you know, I agree with their decision to pull out of Rocket League. It was a smart decision, business-wise. It was just a bit of a shame because it kind of screwed us over, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm sat in this position where I'm like, well, do I now just commit to not being a coach anymore and go back to doing streaming analysis content? But then if I put my stream on now, why would anyone want to tune in to Gregan analyzing Rocket League, right? Because when I was a caster, I was on the desk. You know, you're a viewer of RLCS. I was presented as the smart guy on the desk, right? That was my position. That was my role. It was, Gregan's the one who you listen to because he knows the game, right? That was my role. So then if you see that little icon on Twitch that says Gregan streaming and the title analyzing final of blah, 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 you're going to click on it because you're like, that's the smart guy in RLCS. He didn't have enough time on the desk to analyze that gameplay. I want to watch his stream where he does it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now if I do it, it's like, this is a random guy in the community who's claiming to be knowledgeable, analyzing RLCS.
Nah, anybody that used to watch you and stops watching, you're fake, and I'm calling them all out.
But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, no, it's true though. Like they're people just for some reason, and that's why I said it. If it feels weird that someone's value or skills are tied to a position, because they shouldn't. If someone's good at something, they're good at something, right? And it whether maybe other people were inflating how good you were at something in their minds, and now they're like, okay, well, still good, but he's not as good because he's not, and that's on them. But it sucks that people tend to see it that way, right? There's that bias of well, they don't have this position, they must not be good anymore, which isn't inherently true.
Yeah, but there is some truth to it, because in theory, in the way the world works, that's how performance positions should work. In the same way, a player is no longer on top team, therefore player is no longer best player in the world.
Right, no, it can. That's what I said. Inherently isn't true. But it can be true.
Yeah, it should be the way it works, in the way we understand things, right? Like if someone is no longer on the analyst team for a broadcast, then in theory they should no longer be someone you should trust as a point of view, because if they were trustable as a point of view, they'd have kept them. In theory, right? We know that's not the case, but like I can see why that would be the way you'd extrapolate it as a viewer of Rocket League, and that's fine. And that's where I'm like, well, okay, now I need to think about other career paths potentially, or try and find my way back into the RLCS so that I can commit to that route, or find a team that I can coach where I can dedicate all that knowledge to one individual. And just a bit self-indulgent for a moment, and I've said this to a few people because this is the way that I kind of validate my confidence at times, is I should, in theory, and this might be changing now that I've been out of Rocket League for a bit with like regular roles, I should in theory be the smartest person in Rocket League. Whether I am or not, no one can know. There is literally no way of measuring it. There is no way anyone can work this out.
Yeah.
In fact, it's very likely I am not. There is probably someone out there who has risen above what I'm about to describe. But based off of the series of experiences I have had through my life, I have been very fortunate that I was a caster early on in the game, that I was able to coach a team in season 2, learn from them, learn the skills of coaching, compete in the highest level of Rocket League in those weeklies early on, and in ranked early on when, I used to compete against pros. So I've done all sorts of stuff like that. I've been able to compete in sport, compete in all this kind of stuff. So I've had all those experiences. I've coached for over 12 years of my life, just in general. I've been trained in all these other things. I've been able to cast the RLCS. I've been able to coach some of the best players in the world. I've coached probably more players than most. So I've had all the experiences that have set me up to be the smartest person in Rocket League, the best coach in Rocket League, in theory. But in practicality, you cannot know that for sure, right? Because I might not have taken those opportunities as well as I could have.
Yeah.
So that's the position I'm sat in right now, where I believe I could be and should be if I do the right things. But now with the 6 months away, I'm starting to doubt that and starting to think, well, maybe I've got to try and find a different path in life, right?
Okay, well, off the bat, I'm going to say, well, I guess I was going to say, I can tell you from my perspective, you're way smarter than me, but I guess that's not hard to beat. But I will say, again, I think your value still remains. I think you're, just to give you, if it means anything, a confidence boost, I think you have all those skills, and I think those are useful skills. And I would love to continue seeing you finding a position, a place in this. So I want you to keep pursuing all the things in your projects that you were doing. And I hope people are smart enough to realize that they need to go listen to your podcast, listen to any extra stuff. If you're doing interviews and stuff at live events, they need to be watching that, because I think you bring a lot of value. And I think but I can see how you can easily start to lose that perspective of yourself after the past, the 6 to 8 months or whatever. And it can be very easy to lose that perspective. From my perspective, that value still remains, and you need to continue putting that value out into the world for others to consume.
Yeah, that's kind of the scary thing as well with esports, is you dedicate all that time, and we're quite lucky with Rocket League because Rocket League has survived a long time.
Yeah,
but
it's crazy.
I'm feeling what I'm sure a lot of the dead esports people were feeling when their games started to die, right? When they've dedicated all that time and all that energy to a single game, that when that game starts to no longer give them value, what are they? What do they dedicate their life to? And like, I'm trying to become more generalized now. And it's something I've done at various stages. After Vitality, I almost left Rocket League and went and worked in League of Legends.
Okay. And your skills, I was going to mention before, your skills are very applicable. Like, you don't need to know much about the other games to apply the skills you have.
Yeah, and so I've definitely been aware of that the whole time with Rocket League. So like I said, I almost went and became a performance coach in League of Legends with a team. I've spoken to some teams about becoming head of esports or head of performance.
And you got a good resume to show them.
In theory, and that's where I'm like, okay, maybe I go down that route. But the moment you commit to going away from the in front of camera work and away from the team performance side, it's kind of hard to go back, right?
Into it, yeah.
So that's where I'm like debating right now. Do I give this a little bit more of a go? Do I try and find that opportunity? So yeah, I guess this is just sort of me opening up about the challenges I've been facing recently, because I'm not streaming, so I'm not talking about these things publicly. Like, streaming makes me feel very self-conscious about the situation I'm in, because you can very obviously see the effect of what is going on. And that's normal, right? YouTubers have that, streamers have that. You fall off at times. But it is just a reminder constantly when you're doing it that that's what's happening, you know? And as much as people are lovely, a message coming into your chat and being like, hey, I forgot that you stream, or I haven't seen your stream in ages, or this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, thanks for reminding me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they're doing it out of kindness, but by just saying stuff like that, it sort of just reminds you of where your life is at. So that sort of, and it's like a weird anxiety around committing to stuff. Because realistically, if I streamed every day for the last 6 months doing analysis content, who knows, maybe I'd have thousands of viewers every time I go live analyzing Rocket League. But realistically, I took that risky judgment to go, perhaps I'm a coach again, and went down that route, and then I guess made the wrong decision at times, and now we're off the track that I thought we were going down, you know?
Yeah, I wonder too if it's because I sit back and I say, what is my value, right? I mean, but if I ever am no longer an RLCS talent, anybody listen to my podcast, you better keep listening, because I'm not going to stop it. And if you stop listening, I'm going to be very upset with you. But yeah, it's very hard to sit back and say like, hey, what is my value? And I get anxious about that too, of saying like, well, I don't think I have any value to people, so I'm not going to make content, because I'll put it out there and someone's going to do it better. And part of what the podcast was for me was convincing myself that I just need to start making content. I'm just going to do it. That's why we have these scenes. We have 1, 2, and 3. We didn't use the widescreen on you yet.
There we go.
We have a lot of background to show here. There's a very interesting,
it's just very white and
beige
boring
wall behind you.
Yeah.
But I had to just do it. I had to just start making it, and some people have found value in it, and I realized, you know what, as long as some people find value in it, I think doing it is worthwhile, and not doing it is almost fits into the self-fulfilling prophecy of well, of course I don't have value because I don't provide anything. I'm not doing it. So as anxious as it can be of hearing someone come into the chat and say, oh, I forgot you did this, I almost feel like not doing it is adding to it in a way, right? I'm not saying your anxiousness is to be forgotten about here, because it's very real, and I feel it too.
I guess the big thing is with the podcast I'm doing, I realize that it's not getting the views and numbers right now to warrant the cost of what we're doing. Like, I've got 2 people working for me, paid loads of money for the set, got all the tech. You know, it takes a lot of production. Yep. You know, I'm sent so many messages out to get people along and all this kind of stuff. and it's a lot of work, but what I'm learning from it is more valuable than the money. I'm in a very fortunate position that I was very well paid for a year of esports, so therefore I could dedicate, half a year's income to doing a project. And then off the back of that, the skills you learn, like the hosting skills, the interview skills, how to run a production for it. I get to employ 2 of my friends who can then sustain a career for a year.
True.
The connections I'll make, the things I'll learn from all the people I have on the podcast. All of that stuff is developing you into a better person. And okay, that again, coming back to a place of privilege, I am essentially burning money to learn, which is the same as university or anything that, right?
It's like schooling.
Yeah, it's like school. But I think the problem a lot of people will do is they won't see that there is an underlying benefit of self-development from anything. And that's where they start to dismiss sections of their life because they were wasted. The most monotonous of jobs out there, you'll be learning something, whether it's discipline, whether it's the people you meet, things you learn, even learning, I don't want to do this ever again is something you've learned. And I think that's where I'm at right now. And I'm hoping that during this down period of learning and burning of money, I will eventually come out the other side a better on-screen talent, a better coach, a better human being, whatever it is, and therefore will land myself in a job which I can work wonders in. And I guess that's the learning message for anyone who is unemployed right now and waking up and just watching Netflix. Like, do something, find something to do to keep yourself sane.
You have to, and I think there has to be a level of, I guess, a level of ego that you have to say, to believe in yourself. Essentially, you have to say, no, I was doing things before that other people found value in, even though I don't know what it is, it must be there, and you have to believe it yourself. To be able to get up and then make content. You have to believe, because there's been so many videos I've scrapped, say for instance on my Star Citizen channel that, just completely different. I'm like, I've had ideas, I've written scripts, and then I'm like, but there was 3 other big YouTubers that made something about this as well, and I didn't put it out there. And then I started getting into the spot of like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna make a video. I said, I'm just gonna, this has been done before, wrote the script, edited it out, and put it out there in my style, and then it was my best performing video within like a week, 20K views, which is more than almost all my videos. There's like double. And I'm like, okay, I had to just believe people wanted to hear this from me. And I think is that ego? I don't know what it, but I had to believe I'm gonna do it, and people are gonna like it because I like it. People are gonna like it. And I believed in the thing I could do. And you have to get content, otherwise you'll just go and turn on TV and not do anything.
Yeah, I think there was Mr. Beast on the Lex Fridman podcast.
I love that. I watched that one, the whole thing.
Yeah. There was a bit in it where he said people always ask him like, what can they do to make their next video amazing? Like asking for ideas around that. And he always just says, just do 100 videos, and then when you get to that 101st, that's where you can start looking back and analyzing everything. Like obviously along the way you're learning stuff. You're learning, you're adjusting, and that's sort of the mindset with the podcast I've been doing is like, I'm just gonna do 50 podcasts this year, one a week with a few breaks potentially. Good. And then the aim is to do 2 years of that, and then at the end of the second year you can look back and be like, we made 100 podcasts. And with 100 different guests, and we did this many different things. Is this something that we can keep doing? Maybe, yes, no. What can we improve on? And like along the way, we've improved the tech, we've improved the editing style. I've improved as a host and interviewer. Our shorts now go viral way more often because we've created viral and much more engaging content there.
I need to do shorts. I've not done that at all.
and like, so there's all these different things, and if you don't just do it, you'll never be able to sort of say, okay, I've given it a good go. It's the same thing with like going to the gym. It's the same thing with eating healthier or whatever it is. Like anything in my life where I've committed to it for a long period of time, I've done well in it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's again, it's from a place of fortune that I'm able to do that without having to worry about every single day. You know, if you've got to work 2 jobs and look after your family or whatever, then you're gonna struggle to dedicate that extra time. But I've had people on the podcast who are doing 9 to 5 jobs, coming home, streaming for 4 hours, and now they're full-time streamers, you know? And like, that's what it takes sometimes. You have to just, you know, have an unhealthy balance towards something to make it stick for the future.
I mean, to give an example, if anybody is like, oh, hey, being an RLCS caster is cool and prestigious. You know, there was, again, same thing. My dad would buy me video cameras for Christmas to help me with any hobbies or projects I had, right? So he always took care of me so I could put time in. But even still, when I was, I don't like asking for stuff. So I was definitely running in overdraft a lot during the early years of RLCS and before that. And I went to, I was trying with 3 friends. We took a few $1,000s each to try invest and open up an esports bar while I was working part-time as a manager at bars. And then I was also at that time, VVV, Rocket League was starting to come around. I was also TOing weekly Smash Brothers events. I lost money on all of those events. I was trying to build this thing. I was going in and sanding floors and renovating this place myself. I was also then doing the bar, then coming home and then casting VVV for 6 to 8 hours, and then getting on afterwards with Lawler to go over the VOD and talk about how we need to fix things or in our casting and that. And so it was a grind. It's a lot of hours, and it turned into this, right? So those hours were very unhealthy. But if it's something you care about, I think you definitely should be doing it. If you care, if someone's out there listening, you're like, I care. Actually, someone did message me, someone that's from a community, and they said, I want to make a podcast about like a history podcast. And I'm like, just do it. And they're like, what else do I need? And I'm like, you need a microphone. That's all you need. Just start. You just your first episodes are gonna suck. That's the inevitability. The first thing you do of everything is going to suck. But if you're listening to this episode right now, go do it. Just start it. Just hit record right now. Just pull up Audacity, hit record, or OBS, whatever. Hit record and make the episode. Don't even have a script. Right? Just start talking and see how it goes. But yeah, you have to commit to those things, and you have to do them.
Yeah. I mean, it's the classic thing of like losing is learning, right? When you're a competitor, you either win or you lose and you learn. And it's the hardest thing to do is improve when you're doing fine. I think it's very easy to just sort of there's a term for it. So when you're just sort of all right, you don't make changes in life. And then when things are going really well, you commit to them. When things are going really badly, you cut them out.
You abandon,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the beta something paradox.
I don't know what it's called, but I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Let's see if I can. Region beta paradox is called. So the whole thing is that people can sometimes recover more quickly from distressing experiences than from less distressing experiences. So like when something's sort of meh, you know, like, okay, say this history podcast, it goes all right, and then, you know, you don't get anything out of it, right? You're gonna struggle to sort of move on from it. You're gonna be constantly thinking about it. You're gonna be feeling bad. Whereas, you know, if something just goes horrifically wrong, and then someone tells you that was awful, you're gonna be like, oh well, I guess this isn't for me, and then you're gonna move on. And like, I think the hardest thing is the very sort of like meh zone is where you spend most of your time learning, because if you care about it, you're going to be reasonably good at it.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be like amazing at it where you just love it and you every single moment of your day you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's those people who are able to push past the sort of like very mild feeling of discomfort in something. And that's what exercise is like, right? Like, let's be honest, exercise doesn't feel that bad. but you know, it's all right. But then what happens is you have a massive distressing experience, and then it's much easier to commit to something. So yeah, like we're not very good at dealing with life in that middle section.
Ground. Yeah. The complacency zone.
Yeah,
maybe, sort of. I don't know.
It's why a lot of relationships last far too long when people are like, oh, you know, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
And then, you know.
Yeah. There's not that push to get them out of it, right? It's not the most fulfilling thing, but it's also not terrible. Again, it's kind of, again, a complacency zone. Is like, well, it's good enough. Yeah, no, I same thing. I mean, like, again, that esports bar didn't work out. We eventually had to cut our losses and say we can't do it. It turned out the landlord was just super crap, and lied to us about some stuff. So we pulled out, and
so that's the moment that you lied about that stuff. You got a moment where you're like, this isn't worth it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Whereas if you carried on with that, making a little loss the whole time, you probably would have kept doing it for so long because you're like, oh, we're only making a little loss right now. We will eventually break through.
Yeah.
But you had a sort of like hit me moment where you're like, this is not worth it.
We can't do this. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And because we knew eventually problems would arise. We're like, oh, now we can see a larger picture here. So we pulled out, but the money we put in, it was lost. And that's fine. But the only thing we can do from that is say, you know what, I've learned something. I learned I learned how to sand a floor. I learned how to do a whole bunch of renovations. I learned how to TO a bit better. I was already decent at TOing. Like, I was one of the better ones in the region. And then but I got better and better at it, how to just manage a community. And through this whole TOing stuff, I learned how to do merch and how printing t-shirts and everything works, because I was talking to the guy who do it. Right. So there was a lot of things I learned out of it. Can I apply this right now? Not really, but maybe I could use these skills in the future. But it just looking at the lost money is not worth it. But I'm happy I still did it. So again, if you think you want to do something, just do it. Even if it fails, I guarantee you'll still be happy to do it.
Yeah. I feel like we have gone down the route of two white guys doing a podcast with life advice. Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's a problem with being white. The problem probably comes that we have we had people supporting us along. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Two privileged white guys.
Yeah.
That's like the meme, isn't it? Isn't it? There's two privileged white guys.
Yeah.
You know,
do as we do.
Yeah.
But I still think there's value, because I've seen people come from again, struggle through, and that's why I tried to at least mention the unhealthy balance of it. I've seen people come from very places of struggle, people that haven't been privileged, break through because they've committed and dedicated so much to it. But the key thing they did as well was they started doing it, and they believed in themselves, right? You have to have a bit of that ego to push you through, that you like this, so you're going to be good at it. I think that can go to anybody, even if you're in a place that's struggling, because I don't know. I think if you like something, you'll find a way, whether it's unhealthy or not, to do it. Hopefully you can.
And there's so much luck involved in life. I think that's the big thing. Whenever you see people who are successful, they've probably had a lot of luck that have gotten to where they are.
I got lucky. I met Cloud Fuel. I wouldn't have my job if I didn't meet Cloud Fuel.
Yeah, I mean, even just for us, we were lucky from the moment we were born, right? By being born in a part
privileged
of the world,
place,
which is
sure.
literally like the biggest differentiator between success stories across all of the factors is normally what country or postcode you're born in, even. We're sitting here preaching, go do it. But at the end of the day, like, the only thing that's in your control is how hard you work and how much you commit to something. And this is something, going back to the coaching stuff at the beginning, when you're coaching people, you've got to convince them that, they're lucky that they got where they are. There is an element of luck, but ultimately,
always,
ultimately, hard work is the only thing that's in your control. And a lot of people lose touch with what hard work looks like. I'd say probably I have lost touch with what hard work looks like recently. I've got quite lazy, and because of it, each day I look at the stuff that's coming my way and I'm like, well, I've got to rely on luck again now. And, relying on luck is only so good. And that's why, like, I've started sending so many cold emails off to people and, like, getting things to happen, because at the end of the day, that's going to create opportunities. Whereas if I just sit here and hope that the next thing in life is going to appear,
you'll fall into it as you were before
in my lap, then I'm never going to get anywhere. So there is an element of the confidence that you described before with hard work together. Those two things can, like, false confidence is what often gets a lot of people's careers started. Like, so many people fake it till they make it and then get those opportunities just because of the false confidence, and
then they develop the skills they would have needed in the first place.
So you have to be bad at stuff at first, work really hard on it, have a bit of false confidence, and you'll get there.
I think just if it, what's one of my favorite stories, it just reminded me, I'm just going to tell this, there was a guy on YouTube, someone filmed him, I forget where he was from, but his drum kit was like a trashed up drum kit. It was like super haphazardly put together, but his drumming was like really good, like some jazz skills in there, and like it just, in my opinion, incredible drumming. And I saw this video someone took of this kid, posted it to Reddit. It blew up, and then someone then got, I think, paid for that kid to go to music school, right? And like that takes it. It's so cool. That's what I love about the internet. There's so many bad things about it too, but what I love about the internet is that kid got an opportunity from a place where I guarantee no one would ever have known who that kid was if we didn't have YouTube. And that kid got an opportunity because even them, they had the skill, but they, until that moment, hadn't had the luck to be able to get into it. But I think it's important that you have, again, three things. I think it was it Dazarin I talked to about this? I'm trying to remember which episode this was on, but I think there are three things for success. There's skill, there's luck, and then sort of a third one, networking. But I think networking is used to increase your luck stat. And for the most part, unless you're just absolutely super rich, which I guess is the luck, you need luck to showcase your skill, and then you need the skill to maintain a position that you've been given because of the luck, and the networking can then help you increase your luck, which will showcase your skill. That kid I talked about had the skill, he just never had an opportunity for the luck to showcase that skill.
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, like the biggest section of that luck section is from your parents or from where you're born or whatever it is. And I don't know do you know about the birthday?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Birthday phenomenon in ice hockey.
Yeah, I knew about that. So it was Veritasium did a video on this. If you guys haven't watched Veritasium, he does a bit on luck. And it, like what month you're born in. I knew about this actually just because I grew up playing hockey, and this was a relatively like known fact. It wasn't a fact, but people just knew. Like if you're born in a certain month, you were bigger by the time hockey season came around, so you likely got more training. People dedicated more resources to you, therefore you became a better player.
Yeah. And I read about it I've seen that video you described, and I read about it in Bounce, which is a book by a British table tennis champion. And he talks about talent not existing. And this is something I've believed in just because it's helpful to have as a mindset, even if it isn't true. Who knows if it's true? The whole idea that talent isn't actually a thing that exists, and that we perceive talent as the set of scenarios our life puts us through in the lead up to the point where the talent presents itself. So talent,
sorry, just to define talent being an inherent
an innate ability to
towards
do something.
Okay.
Yeah. And like there's a lot of people who believe they'll never be a pro Rocket League player because they just don't have the talent. So they'll look at okay, so with you're too old. You were born in the wrong year for it, right? So your set of circumstances in your life, there's one massive factor that just led you to not ever be able to be a top Rocket League player. Also, we were casting the games early on. I sometimes wonder, would I have been a top player if I didn't cast, right? Because then I could have played in the tournaments. I was just about young enough where I could have potentially snuck in. So yeah, there's stuff like that. And then who you meet, the right people you meet along the way. Snasky met ELMP in ranked, and then ELMP took him under his wing, and then he became a top player. Now he's a top coach, etc., etc. Like a lot of it comes down to the right circumstances and not some innate ability. And he describes it through stuff like that, the birthday affected ice hockey. He also, part of the reason why he's a top table tennis player is because he lived near the only center for table tennis in the country that was open 24 hours and had the GB coach work at it. Like, so he then became a top table tennis player. Now, the question is there some innate ability that separates us? Potentially. There's some genetic factors we're understanding now. There's definitely, like, for example, if you've got bad vision, is that considered talent? Like if you have good vision versus bad vision, that could affect you in your life. So there is some like gray area. Like if you're in sport, if you're taller, you'll be better at certain sports, etc., etc.
Sometimes, then, they thought I'd be good at basketball. Nope.
But then, like, it's the skill side, right? So skills, like, no one is born with an extra ability to play Rocket League, but some people are naturally better at it when they first pick it up, right?
Yeah, I guess I was gonna say. I mean, what if you have a coordination issue, right? What if you, right? That there could be. What if I'm just dumb and I'm never going to be able to understand the things I need to change to get better, right?
So then that's where you start looking at talent instead as this formative outcome at the end of your childhood, I guess. Because you can have talent early on, people will be like, oh, they're so talented or whatever. But like, if you're born into a certain household that encourages a certain thing, that shows you this all the time, like if you're born into a sporty family, you're going to be more sporty. But then people look at that and be like, yeah, but they were genetically the same family, so therefore you see a lot of siblings be good at sport, and it's like, well, yes, because they constantly had a training partner around them who they practiced with. Or you see kids whose parents were good at a sport, like a professional athlete's son or daughter will be better than most people because their parents encouraged them early on to do that sport. They would get access to the best coaching. They'd probably get into the academies and so on and so on. So like, there is a weird, like, is it genetic or is it formative lifestyle stuff?
No, that's fair. I think I can, like, again, whether it is or not, I can understand the thought process of that this person had behind what talent is. I do still think that people can stay confident in the work they put in, though, that despite the luck, you still need the skill to maintain a position. I mean, like, if Snasky got lucky but sucked at Rocket League, he's not going to maintain a spot on a professional team for very long, right? You still have to have that skill there.
But then he also grew up his whole life playing lots of video games, so he's very familiar with video games, how to learn new skills and so on. And so that's what I'm trying to say is that people who suck at stuff, they suck at it because they've not started forming those neural pathways to develop those skills better. So, the classic thing is the sporty kid, right? There's the kid at school who they pick up a new sport, they're better than everyone already because they've built up various set of skills with their body. They've got the ability to learn new sporty skills because they've developed them. Same thing with smart people. Smart people can learn other things better. People who've learned a language can generally learn a second or third or fourth or fifth language better than the average person can learn one. So it's all of these kind of, like, you learn the skill to learn through your childhood. Like, I played video games my whole childhood. I played a lot of Mario Kart. I played a lot of physics-based games. So therefore, when I picked up Rocket League, my sporty mind, along with my physics-based video game mind, came together, and I was good at Rocket League from the start. All
right, so here's the thing. It all means nothing anyways, because my perspective is that life is determined already. The universe is determined already. Everything that was going to happen and is happening was always going to happen. It's determinism.
Fair enough. That's your perspective. So all of this, you believe that you're born with a destiny So you kind of follow that destiny.
I think it's very possible. I mean, there's a good video if you haven't seen it that kind of explains it pretty well. If you already don't know kind of the idea of determinism, but the concept that it's called "Why Is There No Milk?" You can just probably Google that on YouTube and find it. But the concept is that if you simulated a game of billiards with the same opening shot a million times over, the rest of the balls would go in the same spot a million times over. So if the Big Bang happened the exact same way a million times over, would all the rest of the molecules in the universe banging against each other happen the same way a million times over?
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
It's a very depressing outlook, but
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, your outcome is decided by the way you think. And if you think that way, it's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with the talent idea. It's good to acknowledge that there is stuff out of your control, like you said there. So, like, for example, we described luck earlier, right? Like, luck is something that's out of your control. Yes. It's good to acknowledge that it exists. But the most healthy mindset for success is to believe that everything is in your control. Because then you're much more likely to work harder on things than you would do if you didn't.
Right, because what was also depressing was, I guess, the perspective that you were saying before is that everything is based on luck. It's like, okay, well, then what? Have I earned anything ever? And
so the healthiest mindset for performing high-end roles in life is to acknowledge and appreciate luck. And understand that it has been a factor in your success so far, but that hard work was something that also led to your success, and that if you continue to work hard, you'll continue to be successful. And I think the threshold luck idea is something I've been working with recently. I don't know if it exists out there, but it's something I've been trying to convince myself, is that there is a point of luck that gets you over a threshold, and then once you're over that threshold, everything is in your control. So
we'll do anything to give ourselves hope that we need to not end on a depressing note here.
Yeah, so
there needs to be hope.
This was when when we won the world championship, I got a message from the head of Vitality, and he said to me, "For the rest of your life, you'll always been a world champion." And I feel like for me, that's my threshold luck point, whereby I now have maxed out the luck I need to succeed, and it's all down to me, right? Now, there will be luck that will change my journey, but maybe even before then, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was the, like, commentating weeklies, meeting Cloud Fuel kind of thing like you described. But even then, like, that was off of me emailing, so that was in my control a little bit. But, like, maybe one of these lucky moments along the journey, maybe it was meeting Vitality when I did, whatever it is, there is a point in my journey so far that I've got over a threshold where now it's in my control. And there's loads of people, like the classic, I'm sure you get asked all the time, like, how do I get into esports? How do I get into this? Whatever. They haven't passed that luck threshold. You've passed your luck threshold when you started doing RLCS, right?
Yep.
So that's the way I'm seeing it now. And it's trying to give me that hopium that I can work hard now and still get success. Because in theory, like, that's the same thing for YouTubers, right? You know, YouTubers who fall off, they've had the luck threshold that have got them up, and then it's then up to them to
maintain it,
maintain, adjust, grow. And like, you look at the YouTubers who fell off, they tried doing the same thing forever and hoped that luck would take them through it, but then it didn't. And then you look at the YouTubers who are still successful, they're the ones who changed, they grew, they developed, they employed people, and so on, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at now. I don't know if this is a healthy mindset. It's what I'm kind of going with right now. We'll see how far it takes me. But yeah, the luck threshold point, it's my copium for life.
All right, I think we've given the audience enough stuff to ponder. Honestly, we could have ended it at like 40 minutes, and that would have been such a compact show. The amount of stuff I've learned from you. But I do have another question before we're out. Just something maybe fun. I'm just curious.
A bit too serious.
Yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts. What do you think of Twitter Blue? And everything around it.
So I was a legacy verified. Were you legacy verified?
I was not. I never applied. So and I don't say this to shame anyone that did, but I didn't like the idea that, because there was an inherent bias when you saw someone with a check mark that you valued their tweet a little more, or people would take it a little more seriously. And Corelli mentioned this too, that he would comment on something political, and then people would see the check mark and think he's some sort of expert, and then just go in on him. Right? It's like, no, this is just my opinion. So I never actually applied ever, because I just didn't want people's to value my opinion over someone else's more, because I think everybody's opinion matters in a discussion. So I never applied for it.
So I applied through, I think Guild was where I got the tick. So Guild got it for me. And I did notice a difference with the tick before and after. People treat you differently. Even in real life, if they found out you had a tick, like the classic thing you do at events where you'd be like, hey, what's your Twitter? And then they'd follow you and they'd be like, oh, you're verified. Yeah. And I've experienced the before and after of that as well, where people don't talk to you much. They see you as just a little side piece in the room. So suddenly you're the center of attention. So it's interesting now that that's gone, because I think that has taken away that weird celebrity status from people who are verified. I thought it got a bit silly in esports. There was a lot of people who were verified who shouldn't have been verified. And equally, there's a lot of people who weren't verified who should have been verified. It's like, it is what it is. I think social media should be monetized, because the companies need to run.
They need to make money.
So I'm fine with the idea of Twitter Blue. I think the easiest thing they could have done was just make it a different tick originally to the verified one, and make the benefits worth it enough that people who were verified would want to get it too. I think they've messed up by giving it to people without actually them paying for it. I think that's, I genuinely think it's illegal.
No, so, I'm fairly certain there are some libel lawsuits on the way, because that's false endorsement from celebrity. Like LeBron, he's been vehemently against it, and now all of a sudden it says he paid for it. People might look at that and say, oh, look at LeBron, he's got no spine, right? Like that could hurt his reputation.
Exactly. So they've messed it up, but I think it was I think Twitter Blue as a whole is a good thing, and I think if it wasn't for the negative connotations behind it, I would be more inclined to get it.
It's just been handled badly.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's also cool to see Twitter making changes, because I think that's something that is inherently a negative side of social media, is it gets a bit stale because no one wants to actually make improvements.
Yeah, I think overall you're going to see Twitter make an impact on social media in general. You already saw Facebook immediately doing something similar afterwards with the subscription thing. They need to. None of these companies make money. Right? For years, it was just VC money, and they're just burning through it, hoping it's blitz scaling is what it's called. Is they just make a product, capture an audience as best as possible, then we'll figure it out, like Uber. Then we'll raise prices or whatever. The data was the main way they were all making money before. Right.
Having that much data about that much of the world was huge, because you could find things out which you could sell to like advertising companies or news companies or whatever. But one thing that was interesting about it is it makes you realize stuff like Discord Nitro or Twitch Turbo and all those kind of things. Like, why didn't they just go down that route? Why didn't they just go down you get better perks for your social media? Like, you can upload videos at higher quality, or you can I don't know, like edit your tweets like they did do. Yeah, they could have just gone down that route and just not made it about verification.
Yeah, it's real. Well, I think that what they're probably trying to play us on is hoping that people's egos would push them to buy it because they want to feel important. Because the previous, again, we talked about it, the previous perception of check marks was that this person is more important. So you let people buy it, they get to feel important. The reality is that the internet can very quickly shift its its thoughts and perspectives on something they once liked before, if handled incorrectly, and it was handled incorrectly. I agree with you. I have nothing against the monetization of it, but the behavior,
way it presents itself, of
it has not been good.
What was was gonna say, like, the verified people following you. If I ever saw someone with a blue tick follow me, I would click on their profile to see who they were.
Yeah, immediately.
And I still do that. And then I often go on and I'm like, well, you're just a Twitter person.
Yeah. It's like, who is this?
But then, like, I don't click on the people who are just like, I mean, I guess it's based off professional looking photos now, right? You just gotta kind of go, does that look professional? Okay, I'll click on them. So yeah, it is crazy how much it changes your view on things.
And that's again why it was a bias I realized existed, and this is why I avoided it as much as I could, because it's just I didn't want to get into that whole can of worms, really. But yeah, interesting. Regardless, hey, Mr. I'll do it again, Mr. Mike Ellis.
That was not natural for you at all, was it?
No, but I've been trying to use everyone's real names just to, hey, look, this is this person. It's not just the personality you see in Rocket League. It's the person. But we did talk about a decent amount of Rocket League, but I'm glad we got to learn. In my opinion, I learned a lot, and I hope the viewers did too, about just how you handle stuff and how much deeper the psychology, coaching, just the physical everything that goes to behind the scenes that people probably didn't realize. I learned a lot, and I hope they did as well. So thank you so much for coming on, just chatting with me, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'd love a podcast, like I said at the beginning, and it's fun just to answer questions. It's always like your side is a lot harder than people realize. I mean, it depends on the level of your podcast, but you know, like if you want a good podcast, it takes a lot to guide it. So I appreciated the questions you were asking and the way you were listening in and giving you questions of what I was saying.
I just wanted to chat with a friend. That's all I was doing. I had an easy job. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, but that I mean, you're probably going to be a better friend now off the back of this podcast, because you're learning how to listen, which is a lost skill in the world we live in now.
That is fair. Either way, you know, I don't know how many people I can push through, but I'll have your podcast listed as well, and I can wish you keep at it, man. I want you to keep at it. From my perspective, I'm saying keep doing the stuff, because you got skills that I think people need. That's
well,
for sure.
You too as well. I've been loving watching RLCS from the viewer point of view. And I guess you've now got a new listener for the podcast too.
Oh, hell yeah. Anyways, thanks for joining. And also, again, anybody that's listening along, thank you so much for continuing to support the podcast. And whether you're watching on Spotify or on YouTube, I appreciate the support either way. And again, as always, keep giving suggestions. Anybody you would like to see, throw them in the comments on the YouTube video. I think sometimes you can do it on Spotify. I don't know. Either way, throw them in the YouTube video. But thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode.